What do you do when the loudest critic in your life lives inside your own head? When the person who humiliates you, sabotages your progress, drowns your confidence, and shatters your peace is you. You wake up already exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from the battle that starts before you even get out of bed. A voice whispering you're not good enough, that you're a failure, that no one really respects you, that nothing will ever change. You try to shake it off, distract yourself, pretend it isn't there. But deep down, you know that shadow voice follows you everywhere at work, in relationships, even in moments of supposed happiness. It turns triumphs into meaningless events, transforms compliments into lies, and memories into weapons. And the worst part, you believe it, because it doesn't sound like a stranger, it sounds like you. But here's what no one tells you, that voice isn't really you. According to Ethan Kross, author of Chatter, that cruel, self-sabotaging inner dialogue is not your truth, it's your enemy in disguise. It's a survival mechanism gone rogue. You see, the mind was designed to protect you from threats, but it doesn't differentiate between a tiger in the jungle and a comment from your boss, between a real danger and a feared rejection. So it attacks, it floods you with doubts, it spirals you into overthinking. It repeats every painful moment from your past and projects it onto your future. It convinces you that failure is inevitable, that you're permanently broken, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. This is not your fault. This is not weakness. This is how the human mind malfunctions when it's not trained, when it's left to its primitive fears, its outdated programming, its tendency to turn inward and destroy rather than to look outward and build. You were never taught how to separate from that voice. School never gave you the tools. Society never even acknowledged the war happening in your head. And so, like millions of others, you grew up believing that what you hear in your mind is who you are. But it's not. The truth is, you can fight back, not with anger or denial, but with awareness, discipline, and control. Ethan Kross offers a powerful solution, not to silence the voice completely, but to gain distance from it, to master a psychological technique called distanced self-talk that turns emotional chaos into clarity. It's a simple shift. Instead of saying, "Why am I so stupid?" you say, "Why is he struggling with this?" Referring to yourself by name, like a coach speaking to an athlete. That small change creates space between you and the chatter, and in that space, you regain your power. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. You take control of the narrative. You shrink the shadow, and it doesn't stop there. When you combine this tool with techniques like mental time travel, environmental distancing, and the use of rituals, you can reshape your entire mental world. You no longer become the punching bag of your thoughts, you become the author. You choose what story to tell. You learn to treat your inner world as a landscape to design, not a prison to survive. This isn't positive thinking, it's mental discipline. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about learning how to command your attention. So pain no longer commands you. When your mind turns against you, you don't fight it head on. You outmaneuver it. You rise above it. You recognize that voice for what it is, a malfunction, a residue of evolution, a distorted mirror. You stop looking at it for truth and start using it as a signal that it's time to lead yourself. The greatest freedom a man can gain is mastery over his own mind. Not silence, not perfection, but command, because the voice will never fully disappear, but when it speaks, it will no longer be the judge, it will be the noise outside the chamber, and you will be the one holding the gavel. And once you begin to recognize that voice not as your identity, but as a faulty narrator, everything starts to shift. You stop blindly accepting its conclusions. You stop letting it dictate your mood, your actions, your self-worth. You start questioning it. You begin asking, whose voice is this? Really, is it mine? Or is it the echo of a critical parent, a harsh teacher, a rejection I never fully healed from, a trauma I buried but never resolved? Because often, the shadow voice isn't born from truth. It's born from fear, from shame, from moments when you were vulnerable and the world hurt you instead of helping you. And your brain, in trying to protect you from future pain, keeps replaying those wounds, thinking that by obsessing over them, you'll somehow be safer. But you're not safer. You're just stuck. That's the trap. You confuse rumination for reflection. You think you're processing, but you're just looping. You think you're being careful, but you're being controlled. That voice whispers, "Don't try again, you'll only fail." It says, "Don't trust anyone, they'll only hurt you." It convinces you that cynicism is wisdom and that isolation is strength. But these are lies dressed as logic, and every time you obey them, you reinforce the prison walls around you. This is where most people stay for years, sometimes decades, living in a mental space where they're never enough, never ready, never allowed to rest. But here's the breakthrough: your inner world can be trained. Just like the body, the mind responds to repetition, attention, and intention. The tools Ethan Kross shares are not magic tricks, they are disciplines. They are habits that gradually rewire your response to stress, criticism, uncertainty, and even trauma. You learn how to create psychological distance, not just once, but habitually. You learn how to become the observer of your thoughts, not the victim of them. You develop the skill of talking to yourself the way you'd talk to someone you respect, someone you believe in, and slowly your internal tone changes. The critic becomes a counselor. The shadow becomes a signal. The mind that once turned against you becomes your sharpest ally. It doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It means pain no longer defines you. You can feel anxious and still act courageously. You can hear the voice of doubt and still make progress. You stop waiting for permission from your thoughts to live your life. You give yourself that permission. And this isn't just self-help fluff. Studies show that distanced self-talk improves performance under pressure, lowers stress levels, and increases resilience. It rewires your emotional responses, strengthens your executive function, and boosts your decision-making. This is neuroscience, meeting ancient wisdom that the mind, when trained, becomes the greatest weapon you have against the chaos of the world and the chaos within. Think of the alternative. Think of where you'll be if you keep letting that shadow voice dictate your days. You'll keep hesitating when you should act. You'll keep overthinking when you should be moving forward. You'll keep living small, avoiding discomfort, sabotaging relationships, and wondering why nothing changes. You'll see opportunities and talk yourself out of them. You'll look in the mirror and only see flaws. You'll chase external success, but feel like a fraud, because no achievement can satisfy a mind committed to tearing you down. That's why the work must start inside, not with affirmations, not with fake positivity, but with leadership. You must learn to lead your mind, not be led by it. When your mind turns against you, it's a call to arms, not a call to despair, not a sign that you're broken, but that you're being invited into a higher level of self-mastery. The question is, will you answer that call? Will you allow the inner noise to run your life? Or will you take responsibility for the voice that lives inside you? Because that voice is powerful, but you are more powerful. You are the one who decides what story gets repeated. You are the one who chooses what to focus on, how to speak to yourself, and how to respond when fear tries to take the wheel. So start now. Interrupt the voice. Call it out. Speak your name with authority and say, "I will not obey lies disguised as logic." Use the tools. Practice the distance. Train the attention and watch what happens. Watch how clarity returns. Watch how confidence grows. Watch how freedom isn't some distant goal, it's a muscle you build, one rep at a time. The voice may never disappear, but one day it will speak and you'll smile, because it will be too late. You will have already chosen yourself. Because once you've chosen yourself, truly chosen, something irreversible begins to happen. You no longer measure your worth based on the noise inside your head. You no longer wait for your mind to be quiet before you take action. You stop needing everything to feel perfect before you move. You act despite the noise. You speak even when your hands shake. You pursue your goals even when the voice screams that you'll fail. You learn to coexist with the chatter without letting it rule your choices. You see, freedom doesn't come from eliminating fear, it comes from acting while fear watches you move forward. Most people waste their lives trying to fix their minds before they do anything important. They wait for clarity, confidence, certainty. But that day never comes, not on its own, because the mind doesn't reward passivity. It rewards direction. When you take the lead, your thoughts follow, not the other way around. And that is where real power begins, not when your mind becomes quiet, but when your identity becomes louder than the noise. You learn to build rituals that anchor you. You structure your environment so that it supports clarity instead of confusion. You stop feeding your inner enemy with late-night scrolling, endless comparison, or replaying conversations you can't change. You simplify, you protect your focus, you surround yourself with messages, people, and actions that remind you of your strength, not your shame. You become ruthless about what you allow into your mental space, not because you're avoiding reality, but because you're protecting your momentum. And when you do this long enough, a new voice begins to emerge, a voice that doesn't scream or criticize but leads. It whispers truth, not fear. It builds, it doesn't break. It reminds you who you are, even on your worst day. But make no mistake, this path requires effort. It requires brutal honesty. You have to look in the mirror and admit, yes, my mind has been my enemy. You have to stop pretending that it's normal to live in a constant state of self-attack. You have to stop numbing the pain and start transforming it. You must decide that you will no longer be the punching bag of your own psychology. And the moment you make that decision, you become dangerous, not to others but to the patterns that once held you hostage. You become unpredictable to your past. You stop being a slave to your triggers. You stop repeating the same emotional cycles. You evolve. And it's not about becoming a robot. You will still feel things deeply. You will still have days when the voice returns stronger than ever. But you won't collapse. You'll stand taller. Because now you have a map. You have tools. You know how to separate, how to challenge, how to lead. You become the kind of man or woman who can walk into chaos with calm in your chest, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer easy to shake. This is the essence of inner leadership. It's not about pretending to be unbreakable, it's about becoming unshakable. And that comes from mastering the conversations inside your own head, not ignoring them, not resenting them, but reclaiming them. It's about turning your mental world into a place of strength rather than shame. Because here's the truth, the world will always have challenges. People will always misunderstand, disappoint, betray. Circumstances will always shift. But if you are steady, if your voice is strong, then nothing outside of you can truly control what happens within. So what do you do when your mind turns against you? You don't beg it to change, you lead it. You don't wait for peace. You create order through action. You set boundaries with your thoughts. You learn to say, no, that's not true. You challenge the narrative. You rewrite the script. You act with courage even in uncertainty. You walk anyway, speak anyway, create anyway. Because life is too short to be lived under siege by your own mind. You owe yourself more than that. You owe the younger version of you, the one who got hurt and didn't know how to cope, your protection. You owe your future self a foundation of strength, not self-sabotage. You owe the people who count on you a version of you that is led by vision, not by fear. And most of all, you owe yourself the experience of living free, not because the voice is gone, but because you've finally remembered who you really are, the one who hears the voice, not the one who is the voice, the watcher, the leader, the author, the warrior. The storm may rage inside your head, but now, you are the calm in the center. Asterisk, and once you realize you are the calm in the center, everything begins to align around that truth. Life doesn't become easier, you become stronger. The noise might still echo, but it no longer dictates your movements. It's just static now, background hum, like wind outside a fortress, and you are that fortress, reinforced from the inside out, no longer defined by moods or doubts, no longer hijacked by emotional flashbacks disguised as logic. You begin living with intention, not reaction. You stop asking, why am I like this? And start asking, what do I choose next? Because you've stopped living according to inherited mental scripts. You've stopped living according to fear's instructions. You've taken the pen back. And this isn't theory. It's not abstract. It becomes real in the smallest of moments. When you pause before responding to an insult, when you choose discipline over distraction, when you wake up and your first thought is self-directed rage, but instead of spiraling, you breathe, name it, distance yourself, and redirect again and again, until the practice becomes part of you, until you no longer try to be mentally strong. You are. The world around you will notice. People may not be able to name it, but they'll feel it. They'll sense a stillness in you, an energy that's no longer scattered. They'll see that your power doesn't come from arrogance, but from ownership. You're no longer trying to prove your worth with noise or performance. You're grounded, silent inside, dangerous in the best way because you're a man or woman no longer governed by their own chaos. And when setbacks come and they will, you won't fold. You won't make it personal. You won't let the voice turn a loss into identity. You'll assess, learn, and adjust. That's the difference between the trained mind and the reactive one. One falls apart at criticism. The other uses it as data. One becomes paralyzed in failure. The other extracts power from it. This is how confidence is built, not from achievements alone, but from a pattern of self-respect, from choosing clarity over chaos, from talking to yourself like someone worth protecting, from interrupting every lie that begins with "I can't, I'm not, I'll never." You start to see that fear and self-doubt are nothing more than distorted data, outdated protection mechanisms, old stories desperate to stay alive. And you let them go, not with hatred, not with resistance, with leadership, with maturity, with a voice stronger than the one that used to sabotage you. And this is where you truly reclaim your life, because your mind is the gatekeeper of everything. Your relationships, your goals, your energy, your ability to endure pain without losing direction. When you command your mind, everything changes: your posture, your decisions, your standards. You start building things that last. You start attracting what aligns, not what validates. You no longer chase approval, you give yourself permission. You stop looking for someone to save you, you become the one who shows up, consistently, with power, for you. So when your mind turns against you, don't collapse. Don't beg it to stop. Look it in the eye. Say, "I see you," but you don't lead anymore. And then lead anyway, move anyway, rise anyway, again and again. That's what strength looks like, not perfection, not silence, but conscious defiance of the inner enemy. Because here's the truth most people never realize until it's too late. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who trains them. And if you don't train them, they'll train you to stay small, stay scared, stay stuck. But when you take that role seriously, when you begin leading your internal world like a general leading an army, you stop being a victim of the mental storm and become the force that commands it. This is not easy, but it is worth it. And it starts now, not when the voice quiets, not when you feel ready, but now, in this very moment, with the next breath, the next word, the next decision. You decide, no more waiting, no more surrender, no more giving your life to a voice that was never meant to rule you. From now on, you speak with clarity, act with purpose, and walk with presence. Not because the storm is gone, but because you've remembered who you are. And that changes everything. Because once you remember who you are, there's no going back to the man you were before, the fragile version of you, the one who let his self-worth be dictated by every cruel thought, by every moment of hesitation, by every internal storm. That version begins to fade, not because you've erased him, but because you've outgrown him. You understand now that pain was never the enemy, it was the signal. The voice in your head, the one that told you you're not good enough, that you'll never be respected, that you're broken. It was never telling the truth. It was telling a story based on fear, on the past, on moments where you didn't yet have the tools to defend yourself. But now you do, and with those tools, you no longer have to live like a man trapped inside his own skull. You begin to choose thoughts the same way a warrior chooses weapons, carefully, intentionally. You don't allow just anything to stay in your mind anymore. You evaluate it. You interrogate it. If it weakens you, it's removed. If it empowers you, it's reinforced. And in doing this, day after day, you start to rebuild the most important relationship of your life, the one between you and you, not based on false positivity or empty affirmations, but on evidence, on wins, however small, on the fact that you showed up, that you didn't run from discomfort, that you handled the storm and kept moving forward. You build trust in yourself, and that trust, it becomes bulletproof. This trust becomes the foundation of your self-respect. No longer do you wait for the world to see your value. You know it. You embody it. People can feel it before you even speak, because real power doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt, quietly, unshakably. And the irony is, once you've done this inner work, once you've taken control of your own mental state, the world outside you starts to shift. As well, not magically, not instantly, but consistently. You begin attracting better situations, deeper relationships, more aligned opportunities, not because your life is suddenly easy, but because you have become unignorable. Because you no longer move from a place of fear, you move from a place of clarity. Clarity is rare. Clarity cuts through the noise. Clarity makes men dangerous in the best sense, disciplined, focused, grounded, not swayed by flattery or insult, not addicted to attention or external reward. You become a man who doesn't need chaos to feel alive, who doesn't crumble under pressure, who doesn't lose himself when things get hard. You're not playing defense anymore. You're on offense with your time, with your thoughts, with your life. You set the tone, you set the terms, and when the voice returns, and it will, you greet it not with fear, but with strength. You know what it is now, a shadow, not a truth. You speak back with clarity. You don't make the decisions. Here, you put it in its place, and you move. Every time you do this, every time you act in defiance of the inner critic, you train your mind to follow your lead. This is not a one-time transformation. It's a way of life. It's a commitment. It's choosing, again and again, to show up as the version of yourself who leads, not submits. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to escape your mind. You stop needing distractions, noise, validation. Silence no longer scares you. You can sit with yourself, fully present, fully aware, and feel peace. Not because your mind is empty, but because your relationship with it has changed. The chatter is there, but it's no longer the master. You are. That's the real freedom. Not in eliminating thought, but in reclaiming authority over it. So when your mind turns against you, see it for what it is, a misfired survival instinct, a reflex, not a prophecy. And then do what strong men do. Respond, not react, not collapse, not obey. Respond with clarity, with action, with truth. That's how you build a mind that serves you. That's how you create a life of meaning, of strength, of internal peace. You lead your mind, or it leads you. There's no middle ground. And you, if you've read this far, if you've felt every word, it means the leader in you is already awake. Maybe still unsure, maybe still bruised, but awake, ready, waiting for you to step into your role and take command of the voice that's held you back for too long. Don't let it win. Not today. Not ever again. The man who masters his mind becomes unstoppable, not because he's fearless, but because he no longer bows to fear. Start now. You don't need more time. You don't need permission. You need to decide. Decide that your mind no longer gets to bully you into smallness. Decide that every time the voice rises, you rise higher. Decide that the war inside your head ends with you becoming the kind of man who doesn't just survive the storm, but becomes the one who commands it. Because once you become the one who commands the storm, you stop being at war with yourself. The battlefield goes quiet, not because the enemy is gone, but because you've asserted dominance. And in that silence, you discover something deeper than motivation, something far more durable than emotion. You discover discipline. You discover identity. You begin to operate from a core that no longer shifts based on how you feel, but stands firm on who you've decided to be. And this decision isn't loud. It's not a scream. It's a quiet oath you take with yourself over and over again, when no one is watching, when the voice is loud, when everything in you says quit, and yet you stay. You stay in the moment. You stay in control. You stay aligned with the version of yourself that no longer bends to doubt, because you've felt what it's like to live on your knees begging your mind to ease up, and now you've tasted something better, command. You know what it feels like to take action, not because the fear is gone, but because you've stopped asking its permission. This is what separates the men who merely cope from the ones who conquer. Coping is temporary. Conquering is transformation. And transformation is built on action, repeated, deliberate, uncomfortable action that teaches your mind it no longer gets to dictate your limits. Every morning you wake up and take ownership of your thoughts. You drive a wedge between the man you were and the man you're becoming. Every time you hear that shadow voice whispering you're not enough, and you respond with movement, you're teaching it to obey you, not the other way around. Eventually, the mind adapts. It always does. The same way it learned to sabotage, it can learn to serve. But it requires leadership. It requires vigilance. Because the old voice won't disappear, it will evolve. It will change masks. It will become clever. It will sound like logic, like reason, like caution. But you'll know better. You'll recognize its tone. You'll hear the doubt hidden beneath its sophistication. And you'll act anyway, because now you have standards, not just for your behavior but for your internal dialogue. You no longer tolerate disrespect from the outside or the inside. Your mind is your weapon now, sharp, precise, disciplined. And here's the truth most never hear. When you lead your mind, you no longer need to fake confidence. You become it. Confidence isn't loud. It's not ego. It's certainty built from repetition. It's a man who knows he can handle chaos because he's faced it internally and kept moving. It's the look in your eye when you've been through hell and didn't flinch. That's what makes people respect you. That's what makes you respect yourself. And it starts in the most overlooked places. In how you speak to yourself when no one's around. In whether or not you follow through on the promises you make when no one's watching. In whether you choose comfort or command when the pressure hits. Because every choice is a vote. Every action is a declaration. You're either reinforcing the version of you that gives in or the one that leads. So ask yourself, when the voice comes again and it will, who are you going to be? The man who listens to it, or the man who answers it? Because here's what's at stake: your focus, your future, your peace. Every time you let that inner voice run the show, you trade your potential for permission. You let an untrained, scared part of yourself determine how far you go. But when you lead, when you take that voice by the throat and say, "Not today," you reclaim your power. You take back your time, your energy, your direction. And that kind of self-leadership, that's rare. That's what separates the distracted from the disciplined, the insecure from the untouchable. Because when your mind is yours, truly yours, no one can manipulate you. Not your past, not your fears, not even the world. You become sovereign. And a sovereign man doesn't chase peace, he creates it. Inside, every day. So the next time your mind turns against you, don't panic. Don't retreat. Stand still, look it in the eye, and lead. Not because the fear is gone, but because you are there now and you are stronger than the storm. And when you finally understand that you are stronger than the storm, your entire relationship with pain, fear, and failure begins to shift. You stop seeing discomfort as a threat and start seeing it as the invitation. It truly is an invitation to rise. Every internal battle becomes a chance to prove to yourself who's in control. Every spiral becomes an opportunity to anchor deeper into your power. Every time your mind tries to pull you back into old patterns, you meet it not with panic, but with presence. Because presence is the antidote. Presence dissolves illusion. Presence reminds you that the storm is just noise, and you are the silence beneath it. You begin to notice things others miss. You start to hear the desperation in other people's voices, the same desperation you used to live with. You see how the world is filled with men stuck in their heads, lost in endless loops of what if, paralyzed by perfectionism, addicted to the chase for certainty that never comes. You recognize their pain, but you don't follow them into it. You've outgrown that. You don't seek validation where you once did. You don't react the way you used to. You respond thoughtfully, calmly, unshaken. Because you've trained for this. Because you've earned this. You've walked through your own hell and learned to breathe in it. You've listened to your mind tell you you're not enough and kept going anyway. You've built a tolerance to your own fear, not by fighting it, but by refusing to obey it. That's what makes you powerful now. Not that the voice is gone, but that it doesn't lead you anymore. And something else happens, too. You stop chasing quick fixes. You stop needing instant relief. You understand that building a mind that serves you is not a single breakthrough, it's a lifestyle. A lifelong devotion. Like sharpening a blade every day. Like choosing the hard path every morning. Like tending to your mind the way a warrior tends to his weapons, not with emotion, but with precision, with respect, with discipline. Because when your mind is sharp, your life is sharp. Everything you touch improves. Your relationships deepen. Your work becomes focused. Your presence becomes magnetic. Not because you say the right things, but because you are the right thing. Because you've done the inner work. You've paid the price. And here's the secret no one tells you. The shadow voice never fully disappears. It evolves. It waits. But now you know how to deal with it. You don't need to silence it. You don't need to agree with it. You just don't believe it. You outgrow its control by outworking its patterns. You replace hesitation with execution. You turn anxiety into strategy. You convert confusion into direction. And you do it over and over and over again until that becomes your default. Until the shadow voice can scream as loud as it wants and you don't even flinch. Because now you walk like a man who's seen his own darkness and made peace with it. You don't fear it anymore. You don't hide from it. You integrate it. You lead it. And that changes everything. You no longer need external validation to feel worthy. You no longer need circumstances to be perfect before you act. You are grounded, self-led, directed by something deeper than thought by principle. You don't need to feel good to do good. You don't need to feel strong to be strong. That's what makes you unstoppable. So when your mind turns against you again and it will remember this, you've already won. Not because the voice is gone, but because you are no longer at its mercy. Because you've become the kind of man who can walk through mental fire and keep moving. Not just once, but every day. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. You've stepped out of the cage. You've shattered the illusion that your thoughts control your fate. They don't. You do. You write the story now. You dictate the next chapter. You're not the victim. You're the author, the architect. The storm may return, but you are no longer afraid of the weather, because you are the one who commands it. And the man who commands the storm commands his life.